Written, directed, and starring Viggo Mortensen, The Dead Don't Hurt is a classic-styled western with a somber tone akin to such films such as Eastwood's marvellous Unforgiven. Whilst it plays a traditional tale of lawlessness in the West and betrayal and revenge, the film takes a rather unique approach by focusing primarily on the female perspective via the character of Vivienne, played by Vicky Krieps. Vivienne is a French-Canadian educated woman who falls for a Danish immigrant, Holger, played by Mortensen, moving to his remote cabin in Nevada near a small community known as Elk Flats. The town itself is under the rule of a corrupt landowner who has the mayor and law firmly under his control. The landowner's son, Weston, constantly causes trouble for the town, but any of his violent outbursts are blamed on others who take the fall for him. However, when Olsen joins the Union Army and goes to fight in the Civil War, it leaves Vivienne to fend for herself in this den of vipers, and on Olsen's return, he finds that their lives have been changed in a major way. Now, the first act of this did stumble a little, as the tale shifts between multiple moments in time, which was sometimes unclear as to which parts of the timeline we were viewing, and it felt a little disjointed at the start as a result. However, by the time the first half hour had passed, this no longer seemed to be an issue to me, and any hops back and forth were more clear. This approach, whilst initially confusing, did, however, allow the tale to start pretty much with a bang before we get to piece together the moments that came before it, and by the midpoint, I was entirely drawn into this journey. The casting is strong. Krieps and Mortensen really deliver, and the supporting cast around them all inhabit their roles well, grounding the mix of characters in this small town so well that it's hard to discern who's corrupt and who isn't. As the tale weaves back and forth, and the latter half builds to an eventual showdown, nobody oversells their role, and much like the aforementioned Unforgiven, Mortensen avoids sensationalizing the violence. Indeed, this film seems to actively try to avoid the usual cliches and tropes of the genre, while still playing with them to some degree. As a fan of the Western genre, and especially the more melancholic ones that are more about the darker edges of humanity and how the frontier allowed the worst of it to thrive, this was a film that impressed me, drew me in, and left me satisfied whilst also wanting more. Mortensen's skill with storytelling in a visual medium really shines through here, and it's clear that this is a genre that he himself must have a lot of love for, with every frame, every line, and indeed the haunting soundtrack that accompanies it, again composed by Mortensen, all combined to carve a place in the higher tiers of Western output. Sasquatch Sunset is a curiously odd film, sometimes delivering wry humour, sometimes gross-out comedy, but also hitting with a social commentary on the modern world's encroachment and destruction of nature, all through the eyes of a family of Sasquatchers in the forests of North America. Somewhat documentary-like in approach, this is a film with no spoken language aside from the grunts and howls of the family. The first few scenes showing the group as they wander the forest, occasionally banging a rhythm and howling out as they seek others of their kind in this lost wilderness, before comically engaging in pastime activities, initially made me chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Somewhere under the rather decent prosthetics were Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough, although trying to discern who they were was difficult, but not really that important at that point. As the film settled down into the more somber tone, as the family progressed through the wilderness and start to encounter perils along the way, the film slowly began to lose me. Structured into chaptered seasons, we see the group over the course of a year as they melancholically come to realise that they are alone and that their group is set to get smaller and smaller, with only the imminent arrival of a newborn offering any hope for the future of their tribe. This all sounds deep and meaningful to some degree. And indeed, there are moments in which the group come into contact with aspects of modern man, offering a chance to assess how we have ravaged and destroyed the natural world. But it's also in these moments that the film lost me, with some unnecessary actions from the family that soured any serious approach that the film could have been taking. One scene in particular, at around the midway point when the group encounter a road, is so ridiculously crass for no valid reason that it marks the point of the film where I was pretty much done with the whole thing. Crass, gross, and juvenile at times, the balance with the more serious points that the film is trying to make simply doesn't work, and the end result felt like a dull mess of ideas that might have fit well into a short 20 minutes, but instead forcibly stretches itself to just under 90, breaking any attention and making for an uncomfortable watch for a multitude of reasons. There's some interesting ideas, but sadly tarnished by the mixed approach to delivery that makes it hard to take serious, but is too pondering to be fun.